Welcome, letting people connect to their audio. So glad to have you here.
Welcome.
Nice. So let's get started. I'm Rebecca, and I'm the communications wizard here at Round Sky Solutions. Thank you for joining us for our introductory webinar on confident cooperative facilitation. So if that's what you're here for, you're in the right room. And you're in the right place if you're wanting to think about facilitation and make progress while also being inclusive and cooperative with the people on your team. If you believe that the how is just as important as the what, then you're also in the right place. And we know firsthand that collaboration can be super challenging. And also we know that it gets easier with skills and patience and tools that can help to hold us and our teams into complexity. And we also know that it's worth it and definitely part of the answer to our most pressing challenges. So thank you for being here today. And many of you know us. I see some familiar faces and some new faces. Thank you for joining us. And I just like to start all of these webinars with just sharing two things about Round Sky, so you have a little sense of who we are, and you're welcome to ask questions also. So the first thing is that, see if this will, okay, great. The first thing is that Round Sky is a remotely operated worker-owned cooperative. So we're all over the country, kind of, we're small. And worker-owned cooperative means that we are a business where the workers own the business together. So we're both structurally and management-wise collaboratively owned. And we believe that there are two main training opportunities when it comes to developing leadership and facilitation capacity. And I think that we're a little bit unique in that we combine the two. The first is tools and processes that we teach under CoLab. That's what we call our work. And even if these tools are perfect, not saying that they are, that those exist, that only matters as much as the people who are in leadership. And so that brings us to number two, which is personal development, to build self-awareness, groundedness, and emotional intelligence into our facilitation. So we approach that with both tools and personal development. And then that leads me to the second piece I want to share with you. So the ways that we do our work is through courses and trainings, and we focus on both of those hard skills and soft skills, for lack of a better word. And we approach this webinar today with the same kind of sense. And our main efforts are put into our cooperative leadership certification program, and our students and clients have really helped shape what is the most important pieces to build confidence. So we'll be bringing references of those tools that we teach there and introducing them here in this webinar. So if that resonates with you and you'd really like to go deeper, you'll probably leave with questions. That's a really great place to go to next. And applications are due next Friday, September 10th, already September. So just a little intro. And many of us are on Zoom much more than we'd like to be these days. So thanks for taking that time. But just to touch on logistics for this webinar is that it is being recorded. It probably alerted you, and we'll share that recording with everyone who registered afterward. And we'll be taking questions throughout the webinar. We have some time at the end to go into them. And you can ask questions or make comments in the chat box, which is the speaking bubble image, which may be at the top of your screen right now. And you might have a little alert in your toolbar that is from Daniel, and that's your chat box. And if you have any tech issues, feel free to chat me directly. Rebecca, she, her, Round Sky is the name, and I will do my best to help you. And in general, you all are doing a great job, but stay on mute unless prompted, because our mics are really good at picking up background noise. So with that, we have 1 quick hour, and like I said, you might leave with questions, and I think that's good because that means you're kind of grappling with the material. So we're available via email if you want to ask those as well if we don't get to it. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Daniel to help us kind of get grounded here. And then we'll do some introductions afterward.
Super. Yeah. And Rebecca, if other folks come along.
I'm sorry, Daniel. I was letting people in and I muted you.
Oh, very good. I'm audible again. Oh, good. Okay. Hey, welcome everyone. I'm really glad to see you here. Some familiar names and some new folks as well. I'm really happy to be here with you all. And one of the things we like to pay attention to in our work is our bodies and our own kind of somatic experience and understanding of how we show up in our facilitation, in our team participation, in our cooperative work. So I just want to start with that today, just a little bit of a grounding and arriving with us all. And like everything we do today, please participate how you like, basically, right? You know your body and your own self best. So anything I offer is just a suggestion, and you might know exactly what you need to do to ground and arrive. And it might not be what I'm saying. So please just do what you know works for you. And in the meantime, let's just settle for a moment. When I like to arrive a little more fully, I often start with like the feeling of gravity in my body, right? The way that my arms are resting gently on the armrests of my chair, the way that my feet are pressed into the ground lightly, and the seat of the chair and the back of the chair holding me up. So that's a possibility, just to sense into like all the places that gravity is holding you against the earth in a sense. What's that feel like? Often it helps me feel like I'm here and I've arrived in some way. And of course, breath, so classic, our breath can get all out of whack, and just the first step is just to notice it and not necessarily do anything or change anything, but how are you breathing? How's your body holding you right now? I'll admit for myself, there's the butterflies of getting ready to, present and getting ready and all the things. And it's good for me to just like let my breath out with a little sigh or something to arrive a little more fully. Yeah, feel free to make some noises or stretch or move or whatever works for you. And if you close your eyes, I might suggest opening them and just looking around, like taking in your space, just orienting to where are you, in your environment, what's going on around you. Bringing yourself to your current reality. And part of that reality is all of us here on the screen, right? So maybe giving some of our attention back to, wow, there's all these people who signed up for this, and we're all curious in some way. What will this be? What will this be like? What will this hour be for us? And just sensing into the sense that there's a community of curiosity out there across the internet, and just tuning into that for a moment as well. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope everyone feels present. Back to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I took that moment to kind of flip through the little pages. We can't see all the faces all at once, which is one of the bummers of technology, but kind of noticing who's here. So thanks for being here, and you're welcome to do the same as well if that helps you ground, kind of noticing the names and acknowledging. And I want to give us some space to also get to know who is on the call today. And this is also an important part of our work, is connecting in community, and improving facilitation is really about being in community. Otherwise, there's a disconnect. So we're going to break out into some small groups to introduce each other, and I'll share my screen so you have a visual of what we're prompting you, and use the few minutes as you'd like. So share your name, your pronouns, location, organization you're connected to as it's relevant and comfortable for yourself, and any challenges that you're facing as a facilitator at the moment, and what you're excited to talk about or learn today. So Daniel just posted those in the chat, so you have that visual also in your groups. But before you do that, Daniel and I will model those introductions, and then I'll put you in the breakout rooms. So I'm Rebecca, she, hers, and I live in New Orleans. I'm the communications lead at Round Sky. And a challenge I face in facilitation is knowing my boundaries as a facilitator in meetings, when to kind of know to cut people off, or in a new space specifically, what my role is there. And today I'm feeling really grateful to be a part of this conversation, because cooperative facilitation skills and tools have come up in many contexts of my life, and sharing power together is really important to me. And I've learned a lot from these frameworks about holding space for team members and learning as we go, and basically not expecting perfection. So that's my introduction, and I'll pass it to Daniel.
Thanks, Rebecca. And Rebecca has had to evacuate New Orleans, actually, and it isn't there currently. So blessings on your week and your month with all that. So anyway, I'm Daniel, he, him. I live in Vermont. I'm one of the facilitators and coaches here at Round Sky Solutions Cooperative. And one of the challenges that comes up for me as a facilitator is knowing when to stick with the agreed upon process, or when to shift gears to meet the needs of the moment. It seems like this very common dynamic and tension that I'm running into, and I think a lot of people are running into. And today I'm really excited to get to know, to get some new ways of thinking about how do we build our capacity as a facilitator, both new skills and new outlooks. I'm trying to tune into the distinction of what do we need to do, and what do we need to become. And so that's what I'm interested in today. Thanks.
Thanks. Great. Thanks, Daniel. So I'm going to put you in some breakout rooms, and let's see, make sure that these are, you'll have 2 or 3 people in each room. And if you need help, you can raise your hand and I'll come in, if somebody's disconnected for some reason. So I think everybody is there. So I'm going to open them, and you'll have 5 minutes. So just give each other a couple minutes each, and we'll see you on the other side. Welcome. I just put folks in breakout rooms. I'm not sure if you can hear me yet, but I'm going to assign you to a room. Let's see. Welcome. We're in breakout rooms doing introductions. If you can hear me, I'm going to assign you to a room, and so you can get some introductions in. Welcome, Jen. We're in breakout rooms. If you can hear me, I'm going to assign you to a room so you can meet some other folks and have some time to introduce yourself. Welcome back. I hope that wasn't too much of a whirlwind, or if it was, it wasn't too unsettling. You'll have a chance to get back into breakout rooms also. Welcome.
It's so nice to see all of your faces for a moment here as well as you come out of your breakout rooms. Welcome.
True. No pressure, but also very welcome. And I'd love to hear from a few people what came up for you, any themes, maybe like you can put in the chat or raise your hand, or just open your mic, just a couple people who want to share.
Sure, I can start that off. So I was meeting with Kim in the breakout, and she was talking about just how when people in a group are passive and not really jumping forward, the tendency can be to just jump in as a leader and sort of fix things. And I can relate to that completely. I get frustrated at times facilitating when people don't participate. And so I need to check myself and see what kind of space I created. So I'm curious about that.
Definitely experienced that before, kind of jumping, filling the space in some ways to try to increase participation or holding back, and all the dynamics that can come up there too, that dance. Thanks for sharing. Edward, would you like to share?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm on the board of directors of a medium-sized food co-op, Belfast, Maine. And what we're finding is, as we have to make big decisions, we're trying to use consensus decision-making, but we really haven't been trained in consensus, formal consensus, which can be kind of a migraine for people that are familiar with it. And so I'm looking for something different that's a little bit more really hearing all voices, that actually really democratizes the decision making. So and makes people aware of, really listening to minority opinions and how that can inform the group. So that's it. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, well, welcome. I think parts of that will resonate with many people, especially a group coming together, making a decision together without training or without some type of understanding of where you're going or how you're going to do that can also be challenging. When I hear not having training on consensus, I hear everyone has a different idea about what that looks like, which can be a challenge in of itself outside of the decision you're making, and you don't really need more challenges in that case. And thanks for sharing, and thanks for sharing in the chat box also for people who are kind of audio only or listening in specifically. I'll share those. So interested in learning more about how to facilitate collaboration in groups without any type of hierarchical leadership, you're in the right place. And some members of the co-op belonging more than others, those power dynamics. Thanks for sharing that, kind of the surface, under the surface in some ways that can be. Challenges, questioning if my facilitation style doesn't allow for conversation or empowered engagement, or if the way I'm communicating is coming off as inaccessible. Great questions. Possibly like very dynamic, maybe not a full answer in some ways, like that changes. Moving toward anti-racist, anti-capitalist, non-hierarchical leadership with my team, and how to create a co-op in a cooperative way. Thank you everyone for sharing those, and I'm looking forward to continue to kind of get at all of these pieces and see what we can get at today, and keep them coming. So with that, I'm going to pass it to Daniel to get into some of the first lesson or the first kind of tidbit of information we'll offer you about facilitation, kind of going into the personal development realm.
Yeah, personal development, or I mean, it could be applied to team development as well. It's really a question of like, we're talking about, we need to make changes. We need to learn something. We need to evolve and change and grow in some way. How do we do that? And one of the things that helps us is this lens of both kind of the deep, depth and breadth, in a sense, like different ways of learning. And we have this this little distinction that a guy named Ron Hafiz, I believe he was at Harvard or something, came up with. But it's really quite simple, but helpful. And it's this distinction between what we're calling technical change or technical learning and adaptive change or adaptive learning. And technical change, it's the kind of change when we're learning new skills, we're instituting a new procedure, something that can be, like a procedure that can be followed that we know will solve a problem. It can be solved by expertise. It can be solved by just kind of a typical good management or something like this, right? For example, technical change in our training that we're doing, that technical aspects of the training that we offer might be to learn some of the specific tools that we teach. Like, we're going to go into a bit this idea of tension-driven meetings or certain meeting practices, or group process tools. These are kind of like technical step-by-step, like we can learn the instruction manual or we can follow the recipe, and it's learning, it's important, and it's kind of a technical learning as we're thinking of it. But adaptive change is when we as facilitators or we as an organization need to adapt, to evolve, to grow, to in some way become deeper in ourselves, to become broader in some way in order for the change to take hold. And this requires a kind of learning that's related to innovation. It's related, it takes patience and persistence. It's about expanding or growing into a new self, in a sense. It's capable of holding the confidence and holding these skills with a different point of view, even. For instance, using the example above, when we may discover that when we're trying to implement technical change of, say, using a new meeting practice, we might have other difficulties. We might know exactly the steps of the meeting practice, but we might be hesitant to suggest it to our team. Or conversely, we might be so excited that we're bowling our team over with our excitement, and they're going, whoa, hang on, what's this, And, so how do we do that without, how do we do that giving a good invitation, but not having people feel imposed on? For instance, that's an adaptive change where as our whole style as facilitator may need some attention and some adjusting and growing, kind of expanding in some way in order to really be able to make the change take effect. And as I've said, these principles hold true whether we're talking about individual change or organizational change. Our teams may need a particular technical solution that will, and I don't mean technology, I just mean like some kind of a more predetermined process that we could just follow, and that's going to take care of it, Or we might need to really wrestle with how do we adapt and change our whole way of going about things in order to really be effective here. So we've designed this course, our trainings, to really try to include both of these ideas, where it's not just about the tools and the structures, but also about the interchange work and personal development, including things back to the somatic awareness, starting with our grounding practice, for instance. All of these things help get to the heart of what it means to be a cooperative facilitator. It's more than the tools, it's about shifting how we use our influence in deep and consistent and caring ways. So let's see, some examples here. I'm just looking at my notes here, sorry. Yeah, so some of the some examples of some challenges, like not knowing where your power or your boundaries are as the facilitator, right? Some ways to learn about this more from an individual point of view might be to learn more best practices, which might be technical learning, or or perhaps it's more like learning how to speak up and ask questions of the group, which might be more the adaptive change or something like that, right? Another challenge might be, how can I encourage my organization to adopt these new methods? And I might want to address this first by really learning some new tools and processes with step-by-step instructions I think could be helpful. And that would be mostly the technical side of the challenge. But say for me, I can be kind of shy. The adaptive learning part would be learning to speak up and really represent my ideas about what I feel like would work better, what would really engage people in the process of making a change. So it's kind of, how do we really incorporate both of these sides in our learning and growing process? Both as an individual, as a facilitator, and as a leader within groups of leaders. and as an organization as a whole. Yeah, back to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Daniel. I really like this framework. I think it's super helpful and can be connected to almost everything, possibly everything that everyone mentioned in the chat box and out loud. How we work towards this change. What are the technical pieces? What are the adaptive pieces? And likely it's both for most things. So I really appreciate that. And I think it's super crucial for people to be able to choose for themselves what topic or area they want to work on in order to think about how they want to make change. And that's part of the course, is picking a spot of your own facilitation capacity that you want to give attention to, and then getting support from other people, that community aspect again. So some homework on the screen is to just consider reflecting after this call on how your current challenge or challenges can be addressed with technical or adaptive change, and how you would go about that. So let that be for now. And in addition to personal development and grounding being super helpful for confidence building, I want to come back to the tools and processes as a way of building confidence, because if you don't really know where you're going, that can be a challenge in and of itself. So like I said earlier, we know firsthand and we hear from many folks that collaboration can be really challenging, although worth it. And culturally, we have a history and so many structures that we're in and we grow up in, especially in the US, based on this kind of autocratic leadership and normalized white supremacist culture. If you know Tema Oken's work, this kind of cultural framework that Oken lists out, that forms a basis for how we think about power and leadership and collaboration, and these ways of being really run deep in ways that we often don't yet see in some ways on all kinds of levels. So to create new ways of leading in our teams, we must use our cooperative values and principles to guide us and our structures. And we have to unlearn a bit about the hierarchy that we are living in and have grown up in. And so from this point of view, not being confident about what we're doing in participatory spaces as facilitators is kind of expected, because we're unlearning a lot. And in part, confidence comes from being familiar and having practice with and kind of having a groundedness in where we're going together. So when entering a new territory, as we're kind of going with this metaphor, it's really helpful to have a useful map and a compass and a way to move forward. And as we navigate that, we have some considerations for key questions to ask yourself about what you have that can be helpful. So we found that having a practical understanding of how power works and where it flows forms a really useful map of the territory of participation. It can help to build confidence. And we use this tool called the Power Matrix that I'm happy to share if you're curious about it. But the question for you is, what tools and understandings do you use to navigate power dynamics? And sometimes one of the challenges with facilitation and sharing power together is that everyone has a different definition of power, a different understanding of how you'll share power. So we really encourage kind of creating a shared definition of how that looks in your team and tools to navigate those power dynamics, as have been mentioned in the chat box. So in addition to that, we also really look at meetings as a really important piece of the work. So in our course, we have this process of tension-driven meetings in a living agenda. You don't have to get too wrapped up in those words, but Daniel will be discussing tension-driven meetings in a moment. But one of the considerations I want to offer you as we go about this is, what tools do you use to facilitate meetings that both supports the facilitator's checks and balances and power to guide the process? And also, how is that dependent on the team's participation? So not just dependent on the facilitator, but dependent on the team. And do people know what to expect? Do people know how to participate in this setting? Those are some key considerations for yourself, whatever process you're using. And I'm going to continue down a list of considerations. Another key piece is decision-making, as has been mentioned, and a collective decision-making process that can really support the team's flow and act as a helpful tool for holding the complexity that can show up in whatever process you're using. We use integrative consent. We teach integrative consent specifically. And one of the key considerations is reflecting on your team's process and culture. Are people able to actively participate in decision-making when it relates to their work or their livelihood, whatever kind of collaborative setting you're in? Do they have kind of access to decision-making power? Is the process clear? And does everyone know when you've actually made the decision? Sometimes the challenge is even just knowing when the decision's been made and leaving a meeting with the same understanding about what decision has been made. That's an easy fix. So that's another consideration for you to get on the same page. And lastly, another kind of checklist consideration is about accountability. Collaborative environments really require some shifts in project management and how to keep each other accountable. You can't depend on sheer will that everyone will just do what they need to do. We need support. We need that community check. With care, of course. So the consideration for you is, how do you know you're collectively aligned? And how do you keep each other accountable with care, not the systems that are all around us? And how do you take up leadership in collaboration? How does that look for your team? How do you be clear? Lots of details. If you want this slide, I will share it. And that's a little overview about the key processes that we really focus on in our work. So I'm going to pass it to Daniel to go a little deeper, kind of giving you this zoom out picture and go a little bit deeper into the tension-driven meetings tool.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. I wanted to make a link right now. Actually, Rebecca just briefly mentioned this idea of the power matrix. And one of the key ideas in the power matrix tool that we use is that if we want to create change in an organization, it's important to examine the patterns that we're operating under that are implicit, things that are happening that are based on assumptions, based on kind of hidden power dynamics, perhaps bubbling under the surface in some way. And how do we make them explicit so we can better see the consequences and see the potentials for growth that are connected with the way that things are currently set up? And this idea of tension-driven meetings can provide a safe and powerful way to get at this implicit to explicit move, which is so important for making positive change in our organizations. So let's talk about meetings for a second. There's a reason some people, the reason we think they're so important, and there's a reason why, so many people hate them sometimes, especially on Zoom these days, right? But meetings can be like amplifiers. I really think that our creative power and our intelligence, our in a sense, our collective intelligence in a sense, can be enhanced and expressed when we're meeting with each other and we're bouncing off of each other in creative and positive ways, right? But likewise, our disconnections and dysfunctions and lack of alignment can also be amplified, as we're getting together and trying to sort things out together. So the structure and process we offer for how to hold meetings is meant to focus our collective energy, meant to resource us. And tension-driven meetings are important because we want to make our meetings highly relevant. I'll get to this definition of tension in a minute. That might be strange to keep saying that without defining it, but I'll get there in a sec. We need to make our meetings highly relevant and responsible to our actual collective and individual needs as they evolve. And to that end, we use this idea of a tension-driven meeting. It's a practice we learned from Holacracy, and it's probably used in other places as well. It's really just a best practice. It's just a super simple idea of, if someone's sensing something that needs to be addressed, then they bring it forward and we address it. It's almost as simple as that. But I'll go into a little more detail here. So first, let's define, what are we talking about as tensions here? I see tensions as trapped or kind of unexpressed creative action. Sometimes I like to use this archery metaphor, where each person's creative contribution is their arrow, and the tension is them pulling back the bowstring back, in a sense, right? So you've got this arrow, this expression that's possible, and the tension that's needed to make it move through the air. And as facilitator, our job is supporting people in surfacing and bringing up these tensions, and then guiding the team members through some form of process, some kind of activity to process that tension and help that arrow find its target, the best target, in a sense, or a good enough target, I should say, not the best, right? And you can also leverage the power of our somatic, awareness here as well. You're probably familiar with the term, right? Like feeling the tension in the room or something like that, except rather than being something to avoid, it's something to name, to invite. Tensions can even be pleasurable, right? Like excitement and enthusiasm is a certain kind of like literal like tension in the body, in a sense, is that energy wants to be expressed as excitement is arising in our own experience. Or they can be painful. We can feel stuck or in conflict, in some way. So a primary reason that people avoid bringing these creative tensions to the table is if it's sitting them in some kind of a painful way, right? Or it might be that they're concerned about conflict in the group, is because we're afraid that this tension is going to get released and it's going to be, get into the group, and there's not going to be an effective process or container to like channel that energy and have it come out in a useful way. We probably all experienced when something erupts, in a sense, in the group and individuals are overwhelmed, or we become fixated on our feelings of disconnection or misalignment. However, if as a facilitator we have an effective meeting process, kind of a backbone for what we're going through as we're going through our work with our team, that can help supporting us and others in moving these tensions from the point of naming it to the point of working it through to some kind of resolution, to some kind of moving it forward. It helps the group build confidence in their ability to turn challenging conversations into meaningful outputs. And great. So why don't I just leave it there for a second and pass it to you, Rebecca.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. That is just, we could just keep going, which we're about to, but I really could talk about tension-driven meetings for a long time and how groups are sometimes already doing this intuitively, but without a lot of process. So it can be confusing to know how to keep moving. So I want to share a little bit about why we use tensions and just a little bit more about the why. So let me get us to that slide. So why frame agenda items as tension? So by making the agenda tension driven, inviting input from everybody, it means that one person is not holding the agenda and having to prepare tons of stuff in advance. Although, of course, sometimes tensions can be prepared in advance, as is helpful depending on the weight of it. But this really shifts the power from a facilitator who often crafts the agenda, even if it's with input. It still shifts the power from them and the responsibility to the people on the team. So the collective it's a shift to the collective holding it more. And the facilitator's job is really to show up ready to help the group sense tensions, to bring them up and create a space that is safe and also useful for people. They feel heard, but also have not just feeling heard, but a little bit more than that, a little more oomph. And then the facilitator's job is also to move us through the process, move us towards some incremental change, some resolution on whatever the person brings up. And this way, the facilitator doesn't have to really guess whether the content of the agenda is relevant, because everyone is bringing what's relevant, and things can change so quickly. We've learned that a lot over the last year and a half, how quick things can change and what's relevant. So that is also helpful, putting that importance in the team, that relevant piece. And then this also invites people to show up with what they're struggling with, what they're excited about, what they want to celebrate. They can bring all those things to the meeting. Obviously, over time, you need to create space for this to really be effective, but it starts to make space for that in a really specific way. And it also builds and I think demands engagement. So everyone needs to show up with their tensions and is the censor of what needs to be talked about, versus a facilitator knowing what needs to talk about, what we need to talk about, and what then we're going to do about it. So the people who are there decide that. So I think that's a bit more human-centered in my experience. And so I'm sure you're wondering, okay, now that you've told us like the why and like what it is, or the why, kind of the how in some ways, I want to share a quick kind of step-by-step process of how we think about this. So we use the Living Agenda, which is a Google Doc template, so everyone can see it and access it and edit it. And we collectively place our tensions on that, we being the members of the team. And this can be done beforehand, especially once a team has practice, but it's really good to have a facilitator to support people in naming them at first. And so each attention is introduced as is needed, 10 seconds or less, just what the person's bringing. And then with everyone's building of the agenda, after that's done, the facilitator chooses an item and invites that person who brought that tension. We call them the tension holder, because they're the person who is kind of bridging their individual sense for the collective, is how I like to think about it. And the facilitator moves us through a process. And how they pick the item it really depends on the meeting, but we ask the collective to vote on what's most important for the day also. There are some agenda items that aren't necessary for today, but we maybe want to get them, flag them. So having the team also vote on it is important, and defining the power that the facilitator has is key also. So that's the quick process, just to give you more of a grounded sense. And Daniel's going to share a few examples.
Yeah. So for instance, if we were putting some examples of tensions on an agenda, we might just list them like this here, emails that go to the info address. Rebecca's holding that tension. Opportunity to build leadership. Jamie, one of our team members, was talking about this recently. Partnering with another co-op. I'm always curious about how do we support each other amongst other co-ops better. And so that's my tension for the meeting today, in our little staff meeting or something like that, right? So this is it. We would just name them and put them on the agenda. So I'd say for mine, I'd put that on the agenda, and then my 10-second intro would be, yeah, I've been wondering about doing some co-branded workshops with some other co-ops, that are also in this space and really like sharing information with each other. That's my agenda. I'd like to talk about it today. So that's my 10-second intro. Now people know kind of what it is, and they see the title and my name there next to it on the actual agenda for working with during our meeting. So now that we've had some examples, I wanted to just quickly break out into groups again. We'll just have very brief breakout groups again, and where I'd love to just have you try this. Like everyone come up with at least one tension that you would bring to your team and just share it, bounce it off of your small group members. You can introduce yourself briefly, decide who's going to go first, pick, and just get going. Identify, come up with a title for your tension and briefly describe the tension that you're sensing. And then if you like, write it down, in the chat box with your small group, so you can practice like, oh yeah, this would be the title, this would be my name, that's how I would do it. It's just super simple, but it also gives a moment to reflect like, oh, what what is on my mind that I want to bring to my next team meeting or something like that. So yeah, so let's break into small groups. Well, how long are we going to have for Rebecca? Do you have a sense of that for these for this breakout?
5 minutes total, so you'll be in pairs, and introduce yourself, of course. But I'm going to open the rooms, and I'll give you a halfway mark also. Okay. There are a few people not assigned. Assigned to, if you're in here, hold tight. Making sure that everyone gets in a room and is not alone. Okay. Okay, you should have an invitation to join a room now. All right. So you definitely have an invitation to join a room at this point. You can just accept it and chat about what is up. Welcome back.
Yes.
We're coming back to the end of our time almost. And just want to give a minute or two to hear what came up for folks, any kind of themes. I know you're naming your tensions, but I also think we share a lot of the same challenges in our teams. Anybody want to share a theme in the chat box, or unmute yourself, or raise your hand if that feels more comfortable?
Sure. Something that came up that I'm working through is you're 17 months into the pandemic. How do we stay engaged and participate in a meaningful way?
Mm-hmm. Stay engaged, and also the balance between rest and trying to rejuvenate in any way, if that's even possible for some people.
And what kind of space, we can bring to those
Yeah.
meetings.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And in the chat box, uneven supervision, supervisors with different levels of positional power and skill create unequal quality of staff development for our team members. That is definitely a tension. Thanks for sharing that. I saw some nods also when I read that out loud. So you're definitely not alone in that. Nice. As a hired consultant, facilitator, tension between serving the needs and scope of work of the client and the needs of the stakeholders involved. Yes, absolutely. That is one that is often mismatched and needs some alignment for everybody, really.
I could share.
Yeah.
I heard the phrase in this webinar, accountability with care, and that seemed to be a good summary of something that in a cooperative where everybody has their own personal struggles, endeavors, and lives, to make sure that we each do what needs to be done, and we hold each other accountable in a way that is not punitive or off-putting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a fine balance. And also I really do think that care is core to finding the balance. Yeah, and so thanks for sharing that, and lots of great examples in the chat box. Let's see, self-accountability and team transparency when tasks go unfinished, and maybe even like figuring out how to reprioritize when things get unfinished, and maybe like figuring out what's important. Navigating the path of friends, art collaborators, and business partners, passion project, and nonprofit operations. Yeah, so many of our circles are overlapping in really, really powerful, great ways, but also can make it complex. The value of horizontal teams versus socialized norms about hierarchy. Yes, values. Value, like, yeah, that is a great, I can't even say anything more to really sum up, because that feels very useful and important in this webinar theme. And how do we stay accountable for the responsibilities we have taken on? Yeah, great questions, great tensions here. And lots of different answers to those. I'd say they're in your team, and the facilitator supports like what answer feels the most useful and the most helpful for your team is how we go about this kind of work. And I want to open it up to some questions. We have a few minutes, and we have some more content we can share, but I'd prefer to see like what questions are coming up for you now about what we've shared so far or not. You can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat box. Yeah, Anna, you're up first on my list.
Sure. Hi, Anna Sheher. I have a question. A pattern I saw with me and my breakout room partner was that our tension seemed to be that we were individually the people who were feeling tension of a group, and other people either didn't perceive or didn't comment on that tension. So it was really hard to surface it because there wasn't a context for it to begin with.
Mhm.
So how to start there?
Yeah, I mean, there's just this great story that I learned from one of the folks at Holacracy One, who's apparently a pilot, right? And so you're flying this airplane, you've got all these dials and stuff like that, and he's like on his first he's on his first solo flight or something, and he sees this gauge, and it's doing something funny. It's definitely not in the tolerances where it's supposed to be. He says, "Oh, but everything else looks fine. I'll just ignore that gauge and I'll just keep flying." And he almost crashed the plane that day, right? Because that gauge did mean something, right? So for all sensors for our organization, we have to somehow create a culture within the organization that values that if someone's sensing something, it's meaningful. We may not know what it means or where it goes or how it impacts things, but if someone's sensing something, that in and of itself is enough to get it on the table to be addressed in some fashion, right? So I don't know. The specific answer is going to be really, more specific to your organization, but I think that's a really valuable story about the importance of everyone's ability to sense something.
Right. And holding that, and we can have a principle of that everyone's tension really, even if we don't get it and they're the only person, that it's also really important. I'm just underlying what Daniel said. A good question. And also clearly the how is part of the answer too. And that, like Daniel said, takes time to get into your specifics. And Faiza, I saw your hands up. It's not up anymore.
Yeah, I guess I realized maybe I had a question a little bit more geared towards the longer training that you all have. And just quick pronunciation, my name is pronounced Faiza. Yeah, no worries. But I guess my question was, in terms of this tension talking point, it seems like it's a lot more effective when it's a larger meeting, or at least 4 or 5 people. And I'm wondering if it applies similarly in a meeting of 2 people, and if in the longer training that kind of the facilitation or cooperative facilitation skills that we're going to learn is also going to be something applicable in a small team. And when it's a small team, something I notice is a lot more of our inner traumas or the way we process things come up, and kind of how to navigate, is that something that's incorporated of how to navigate those conversations?
Great question. Daniel, do you want to?
Do you want to take it? Why don't you start, and I'll add if I think of something.
Okay, great. So everything that we teach, we use at Round Sky, and we're a team of 3 to 4. It kind of breathes a bit, and I find it very useful. I think sometimes in our smaller teams, we tend to go with the flow, and we need to be able to be agile and move quickly. So we're in communication a lot already. But as we bring new people in, that structure can be really challenging, because we have talked about lots of things that are up in our lives or up in the work or both. And so a structure can be really helpful for other people to come in and participate. And it can be helpful to bring us back to a center when we're kind of whipped around a bit. So I would say, yes, it's helpful from experience, and it might just look a little bit different about how you integrate it and the process that you go on for that.
Yeah, I meet with Rebecca a lot about some of our communicating, the technicals, the back end of the website and stuff like that. And even for our 2-person meetings, we still use the same process. We have our living agenda, and we surface tensions, what needs to be addressed, and we bring it out, and we use the same process just even for a 2-person meeting. And it provides a backbone. And even with 2 people, it can be less formal sometimes, and just kind of but we have something to come back to, something solid to rest our understanding of what we're doing here during this time that we're meeting. And it helps a lot in my experience.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if we're both kind of in our own world. So then we don't necessarily have to prepare. Okay, I see a thumbs up. We've gotten that. And I know we're at time, but I'll take one more question. Daniel, we actually didn't talk about this before. Is that okay with you?
No, I've got time. If folks want to stay on an extra few minutes, anyone who'd like to, that's great. If you need to jump, of course, please do. And the recording, we'll keep recording. So if you want to come back and catch the questions later, if you miss a few or something, but anyone who wants to stay an extra few minutes and ask a question, I'm happy with that.
Awesome. So we'll both be here then. Perfect. And Susanna, I saw your hand up also.
Yes, thank you. But you kind of answered the question I have and then helped me formulate another one. So I am in Nashville, Tennessee with a garden-based learning nonprofit, and I am the founder and director. So I live very happily in that adaptive place and have attracted a lot of teammates to balance out my team who are much more of the technical mindset. And so welcoming people into this space of not knowing with certainty is not easy, and holding space for just we must accomplish things this way. It's a tension within a tension, if you will. It's a really big question, and I'm really looking hard at how I can pull off the longer discussion. But just I feel like it's almost like a founder's syndrome. Sort of, I've created this place where everything is gray and it's beautiful and you're welcome to bring, but I'm not good at telling you whether it's right or not, So anyway, I'm rambling. I also tend to do that. So you can see how my team is just get to the point, woman.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a little bit more structure around process might help. It would put some limits on you in terms of how, it would create some, stronger invitations and ability to know how to participate from others. Right. So if we have a shared expectation of oh, this is how we do things around here, and it's not just the implicit, and it's explicit and clear. It's not just the implicit, this is kind of how it just evolved because the founder was a particular kind of person and now we're here where we are. Of course, that's going to still be true. You just have to work out those dynamics, but having a little more groundedness around the structure of what how do you run a meeting, and that's one thing that, we focus on a lot. That's the core of the curriculum for our certification program is what we call the standard meeting practice. And it just goes through the steps of that and how you do it and how you facilitate each part. And those are some of the things I think could be helpful.
Nice. Thanks, Daniel. And there are some questions in the chat box that I'll see if I can get to. I haven't taken them in fully yet. But we have a question. I'm gonna start from the bottom. How often do you surface tensions part of every agenda? And yes, we start at the beginning of each agenda. We have a standing document that we all add it to before the meeting. And then when we get there, if there's anything coming up, we can add it. And then we vote on what's the most important thing for today or what really needs attention. And that helps us prioritize, and it helps the facilitator decide how to go about that. So yes, we start at the beginning of each meeting, and it becomes a little bit more like a flow and takes a little bit less time versus the first time you try it, which is just sensing tensions and knowing what feels comfortable to put on the agenda. Do you want to add anything to that, Daniel?
No, that sounds good. Yeah, we do it every time. It's, but it gets easier. It becomes second nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Anya has asked, can you talk a little bit about integrative consent, please? Are you still here? Yes. Do you want to talk? What would you like us to touch on?
I've heard about it from a colleague of mine who I believe has taken your course, but not yet seen it in practice, and just really want to understand what it is and what I can do with it.
Mm-hmm. Good question. I'll let Daniel answer that since you've heard my voice for a second.
Cool.
And I'm also going to pull up
okay. So what am I gonna say about integrative consent? It's it's a modified consensus process in a sense where we're trying to understand. The basic idea is basic idea is that we're not going to block anything, but we're going to go through a whole process of listening to each other and coming up with a proposal and et cetera. But the point of integrative consent really at its core is that we're not going to block anything, but we could object to something. And we're going to, if there's an objection, then we're going to only object based on some kind of evidence that it's going to cause harm. Right. So if it's going to cause harm, then someone's going to object to it, and we're going to then modify it until it doesn't cause harm. There's no such thing as like it just gets stopped necessarily. Right. So the original intention of the proposal is going to go forward, but it might have to get modified in such a way that it doesn't cause harm. So that's the integration. The integrative consent means we're going to integrate these objections. We're going to integrate the concerns of how it could be harmful, so that it becomes not harmful and safe enough to try, right? So that's another phrase, safe enough to try, because we want to have it be an easy decision that is that passes pretty quickly, so it ties into other parts of our philosophy. We want to a little bit from the tech industry, like move fast and break things to a certain degree, right? Like we want to try things, so we get data on how does it actually work. It's not just go around our heads about will this work, won't this work, so not every decision is, some decisions take more care, and more consideration for sure, but in general. So anyway, those are some just kind of like guiding thoughts about integrative consent. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, that's helpful. And thanks, Rebecca, for the link.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll take this last question here from Camila. And if you want to share any more about your question, please do. How do you make the group team dynamic not always be overly serious as a facilitator? How do you have a concentration on happiness and joy, not just business and conflict resolution? And Daniel is definitely the perfect person to answer this, because I think that you kind of hold the playfulness.
Because I'm so serious, I guess.
Yeah, because you often hold the playfulness in our co-op meetings, I think. I'm a Capricorn, if anybody here follows astrology. So serious.
Well, yeah, it's a really good question. I don't think we have necessarily the answer for that, except that it's a great tension to bring to your team and to create maybe your team needs like a dance party break halfway through the meeting. Let's put on some. That's a good idea. We should do this. Put on the music and take a 5-minute dance break in the middle or something. I don't know. I think it's a great question and one that would be uniquely addressed in a sense by your team, but the way our process would handle it would be in a very serious way, in a sense of put this playful desire on the agenda and process it with your team until you come up with a solution that addresses it, and then you have maybe baked into every meeting a play break or something. I don't know. It depends on what you all would actually want and find useful.
We do also have built-in check-ins to our meetings and checkouts, which can add that personal piece, but that's not necessarily a concentration of joy always. But there are specific guiding questions facilitators can ask. But that is an important question, and I would love to hear anything you come up with for our own learning, and everyone else on the call. I will send it out to everyone if anyone has thoughts. So great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us and staying a bit longer, and really appreciate your attention and energy today and questions.
Yes, thank you so much. And why don't you open up your mics and just say goodbye, hi and goodbye to everyone else who's on the call. So it's kind of nice to just have a shout out at the end. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. It's great.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you, you guys. Appreciate it. Sorry I was late, though. See ya.
That's okay.
No problem.